does have a dual meaning for me too, by the way.
Yeah. Okay, babes, here we are, live for another Tuesday training. I'm very excited to talk movement and injuries with you all today who are joining us live on the YouTube channel. And also look at these beautiful people in the club seats today. We had a little fun, little fun. I feel like it was a global tour before we came live today, so that makes me happy. So let me see. I'm going to turn on my view. So those of you who are watching live, thanks for hanging out and waiting for us to get on camera with you. I'm so delighted. There's so many new people here on our channel this week. So I hope that you're also joining us live. I would love to know that if you are. If you are new here, please feel free to use the chat and ask any questions. We're going to talk movement and injuries today, which is sort of near and dear to my heart and all the work that I think most of us is doing, whether we're doing manual or movement work. That's pretty much what we're focused on. And dear to my heart, because this is the place where I start pouring into you about, okay, now that we know the anatomy, now that we know what we didn't know, let's get to work, babes. Let's get the solutions happening. So, in movement and injury, your clients either moved and became injured or weren't moving effectively and became injured, or you are the movement practitioner who is moving them and not knowing you're injuring them, or you're the movement practitioner who is trying to dance around the injury that your client came to you with. All of those get to be history. We get to like solve all that, right? So as manual and movement practitioners, we get to navigate that movement and what's actually occurring. So that's what I want to talk to you guys about today. Please feel free to ask your questions if you have them. Of course, those of you who are here with me live in club seats, you get to just talk. And those of you who are here watching on YouTube, I can see that your numbers are here. I don't see who you are, but please feel free to use the chat. I can see it. It's open and I will happily answer all questions. We are moving through here in July. Where this conversation is coming from, the excerpt, if you will, is from our Inspired Band Anatomy course, which is the wide breadth of anatomy. If I only had 20 hours to talk to manual and movement practitioners, it would be this anatomy that I would want you to know because it lets you know the landscape of all that's required, and then you can go dive deeper in other places. So we're not skimming the surface because we do talk real in this coursework, but we are aware that in all of these conversations, we can go much deeper and probably for a longer period of time, including and especially when it gets to the injury part. But the reason I put the movement and injuries third in our course, Inspired Band Anatomy, is because we tend to want to start there and we make it a longer process than it even needs to be. But if you know more about your anatomy and where the gaps are in your anatomy, you can answer those questions more readily. So that's why we put it third. Also, it just makes more sense. If you don't know what you're working on, how are you going to work on it? And that, of course, you've heard me talk about when we talk about techniques. What's the technique actually doing? You just moving around, or what are we actually affecting? So we're not talking techniques today. We are talking movement and injury as part three of our Inspired Band Anatomy course, which is the course of the month in our club. So all club members have access to that full 20-hour course. If you've not yet joined us in the club and you want to have the wide breadth of knowledge of anatomy, you still have time. So you can come and join us for 7 days as my guest and gobble that all in. And then we move into our next month and our next month's focus and our next course at the beginning, of course, of August. So now it's a great time to join us. You can probably overlap in those 7 days between both courses and just really focus and get it all in there. But I'm pretty sure once you get there, you won't want to leave. But that's just me. So we're going to dive into movement and injuries today. And I have a couple on shoulders that I want to talk to you about that are very current, actually, in not only my own client work, but also in the casework that I know my Schatz method practitioners are working through. And it's super simple when you look at it through the lens of anatomy, and it's super complicated and even daunting when you look at it just from the symptom lens. So, what I aim to impart on all of us, my contribution, yeah, Lori, you're like, spit it out, Gina. I kind of got that, kind of got hung up on my own words there. What I want for all of you is to support you with enough clear and applicable anatomy that the complicated, scary stuff feels approachable and simple. So that's again why we start with so much of our foundational anatomy. So, should I ask you guys how many of you have completed that course? Gary, Anna, Lori, I know Lori,
I
you've taken
haven't.
that course even in person several times and then recorded. Gary, did you make your way through the course yet?
No, not yet.
No? Okay. So, And anybody here who's in the live chat, if you guys are in the club as well and maybe not joining us in club seats, let me know if you've already participated in that coursework. In that course, the only injuries that we talk about, I think, well, let me take out the word only because that sounds a little official, and I'm realizing I'm not official on this right now. I do know we talk about arthritis. I do know we talk about an ankle injury. Anna, are you remembering the other injury that we talk about in part 3? Is it coming to mind for you? No. Lori, do you remember?
No, it doesn't, but
Okay.
I've got my notes. If I find it, then
Okay.
I'll throw it in there.
Yeah, so we cover a couple movement injuries in that coursework. And again, it's a snapshot by with the intention of showing you that like whatever the injury is, you can use your anatomy to support you. So I'm not going to go over those today because they're in the course. And for those of you who are in the club and have access to that, that will just be an addendum to you or a review if you've already seen that material. And so I want to share with you something on shoulders today.
Mhm.
And I'm also going to do my very best to be succinct enough to have space for you to ask me about other injuries. We get it all done. How's that sound?
Yep.
Good. All right, fantastic. Okay, here we go. I know, right? Shoulder injuries are, how many of you navigate shoulder injuries in your practice, by the way? Show of hands, everybody, right? How many of you are like, no problem, bring me a shoulder injury, fully confident? Anna, you are? Yeah? Tell us. Where's your confidence level on shoulder injuries? Love to know this.
So I had a client this morning who came in with a shoulder injury and needed to went right back to the anatomy. Was the problem the scapula? Obviously, was the problem originating just from muscles around the scapula, or was it originating right in the joint and potentially the rotator cuffs?
Mm-hmm.
And I just went straight back to the anatomy, and the anatomy helped me understand. I put her through, movements of the scapula that she had no pain there. Put her through movements, definitely of the arm and the glenohumeral joint, and found where it was uncomfortable, and just determined it was not the muscles that were controlling the scapula. It was actually a rotator cuff injury. So and then did some work around that, and I thought it was brilliant. I just went back to the anatomy. That was it. Just went back to the anatomy. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Did she have any measurements?
I did not take measurements on her because I know that. I saw your eyes popping. She is an impatient client, and we talked about that again today. That when she's with me, she needs to. She needs, but it would be beneficial if she could stay with what I'm doing and not try to rush things. So with that in mind, I did not do measurements.
Okay. And ironically, you'd get to the solution quicker if you had the measurements. So if you really are navigating her impatience, that's the way to do it, to get there more efficiently. And
good point.
Just a good reminder. Okay. So with shoulder injuries, it can be lots of things. So Anna, you mentioned, is it rotator cuff? Is it scapula action? Is it connection to the cervical spine? What actually is underlying all of that? And we know that symptoms are rarely where the source of the problem is. They just are rarely the source. So we want to find out where the source is. In order to do that, you absolutely need to have anatomy. So let's just assume right now that we're focused on shoulders, and I've got 3 shoulder injuries that I want to walk you guys through and share with you how the injury was created by the movement, how the injury was not remedied by the movement, and then therefore made worse, not started by the movement, but not remedied by the movement, and then therefore made worse, and how the shoulder injury had nothing to do with the shoulder. Okay, so those are the 3 I've got for you guys. Ready? First one, let's get Murph. First one's first. So you named it, Anna, with the anatomy. When we're navigating a shoulder a shoulder problem, it could be lots of things that are specifically shoulder. There's 3 joints in the shoulder. So everywhere there's joints, there's movement. We talked about that in part 1 of Inspired Beyond Anatomy. So what are the joints? What's the movement that's available at those joints? And what muscles are making that movement happen or not making the movement happen? That is your number 1. Like, you got to go there. If you suspect that the injury is actually at the shoulder and you're not going to follow the 90-10 rule about referral pain, or you have followed the 90-10 rule and you've determined and assessed that it actually is in the shoulder, you still have 3 joints to contend with. And what are those joints? And what are the movements available in those joints? And what are the muscles that make those joints move? And that's like step 1. What are the movements? Joint action, muscle action, lever system. Then reciprocal inhibition, including synergists. So right there, you have plenty to work with, right? If we were to have just generalized shoulder pain, just came on all of a sudden, and we don't have a history, we don't have a rotator cuff injury, we don't have an MRI report, we just have like, wow, my shoulder just doesn't feel good today. Then you want to look at just baseline anatomy, joints, their actions, the muscles that do those actions. And that could probably sort it for you. Most of the time, we miss the synergist. More commonly, though, when it comes to shoulders, and I heard you name it, Anna, we're working on the phasic action and we're forgetting the intrinsic action, which we also go over in Inspired Beyond Anatomy. It is that important. And the intrinsic actions at the shoulders are the main full-time job of the rotator cuff muscles when they're not moving phasically, when they are literally holding the humerus onto the torso. And clearly Murph's are not working. That's why his humerus is now on the floor. But those muscles are important, and they are meant to hold not only the bone and bone relationship, but also in alignment. So we do talk about alignment of the bones in Inspired Beyond Anatomy. We start there, like lesson 2, I think it is. It's one thing to know the bones and the joints and the movements and the muscles that make up those movements. All of that's important. I just listed that. And also the alignment of those bones in the relationship to each other. And I don't mean chiropractic. I mean muscles move bone. Where have the muscles been moving, and where are the bones in relationship to each other right now? And so some of us are like, well, what do you mean, where are the relationship to the bones? I mean, the muscles just hold the bones and the bones are there until there's an injury. And that's the section that we're on right now, until there's an injury. So step 1 is to find your way back to how it's designed and return them there. And then start looking at the nature of that injury. The nature of that injury will give you other information about what's involved. When we are talking about shoulder injury number 1 that I want to bring up to you today, we're looking at the relationship here on the alignment of the scapula and the rib cage. The alignment of the scapula and the rib cage, super important. This is like baseline anatomy, how we're designed, 4 balance curves, which you guys have heard me say ad nauseum for 100 years at this point. And one of those curve segments is the thoracic, which is the rib cage. The rib cage from front to back needs to be in a neutral alignment in the body relative to the other 4 curves. Just always has to be that way. Always, always, and forevermore. When it comes to shoulder injuries, that relationship and alignment completely dictates the movement available at the glenohumeral joint, because the scapula depend on the rib cage and the alignment of the rib cage for it to be in a neutral position to create full action in this joint here. Just how it has to be. So if you're still not clear on how to measure the rib cage, or whether it's in alignment, or whether your 4 curves are in alignment, good to know. That's your next step of learning. You get to know that. That's what we do in our method, of course. When the scapula are winged, most of the time in physical therapy, for example, they focus on strengthening the muscles at the shoulder joint, the glenohumeral joint, to get the scapula to not wing. And I'm here to tell you that is literally backwards. I just outlined it for you. In order for the movement here to be efficient and to not produce pain, this bone has to be in a healthier relationship with this cage before I can start assigning exercises to this joint right here. So I'm in physical therapy right now, mostly as a test because of my own neck injury. And it is crazy to me what is being assigned for exercises. Most of it's yoga, but I bet you the yoga teachers in the space here are not generating the revenue that physical therapists are generating. And my question to you is why? Because it's not about them, it's you. That's why we talked money in May. Just think about that. And also, if we know better because we do different types of alignment work, then why aren't we doing that? It's a rhetorical question. So when we get to winged scapula, and then we start working out shoulder exercises with that winged scapula, everything in the rotator cuff and the stabilizing actions of the rotator cuff and all of the associated muscles that move the scapula are all now under duress. Do you guys see that? Yeah. So there's a client that I know who's been doing regular weekly exercise with a practitioner, and the client's scapula are winged. And the practitioner said, oh, well, clearly we need to strengthen your shoulders. So they started doing that together in their workout. They started, quote, strengthening the shoulders. And now the client has had a few different episodes where they couldn't move their arm. They couldn't lift their arm over their head. They had pain in their shoulders that they didn't have before. And now what the client does with that is this is what the client actually did. Do I need to go see a doctor? Do I have arthritis? Do I need an MRI? Slow your roll for one, but also that's a natural response to someone who's experiencing a tremendous amount of pain right here in a very unstable joint. The glenohumeral joint's the most mobile 360 joint in the body that doesn't have a lot of stability in it. So if you start bearing weight on that, even your own body weight, you're going to challenge that joint to work effectively. And if it's not stable, it will give you symptoms. And then that's going to hurt. And then everything that you do, even just sitting with your humerus being held onto your torso, is going to be challenged because the muscles that do that holding of the humerus onto the torso have to work full time to do that. But they've also been challenged to do their phasic activity with all the quote shoulder strengthening. So it's not the shoulder that's the problem. It's the lack of balance between the relationship of these two bones. I'm using the thoracic cavity as a singular bone in this comment, but the relationship between the scapula and the rib cage absolutely matter. And you're not going to quote strengthen the shoulder, AKA the glenohumeral joint, and make that work very well. It's just not going to happen. We talk about that alignment between the bones and the muscles that are meant to strengthen and stabilize those joints, and then how to strengthen those muscles when the joints aren't aligned. We went over that in our Maximizing the Lever System masterclass. That's all we focused on, and it's true everywhere in the body. It's especially true at the shoulder, given the precarious nature of this joint. So when your client presents with winged scapula and shoulder pain, it's the winged scapula and the relationship between the thoracic cavity, AKA the four curves, and less about the quote rotator cuff injury. So guys, when you're testing your clients and you see that a rotator cuff muscle, which you can easily assess with phasic activity, medial or lateral rotation to start with, when you can easily assess a muscle that's working or not working, you get to not start throwing out ideas to your client that they have a quote rotator cuff injury or discrepancy. Don't do that. Because look what happens with a client who just has pain here. Oh my God, now do I need to go have an MRI? They literally spin into, I call it future tripping. I do the same thing. Oh my God, does this mean? And I'm in the business. Pain changes your chemicals. We talked about that in chapter 2 of Inspired Beyond Anatomy. It makes you think differently. When your clients are injured, and they've either become injured in your presence or they've come to you with an injury that they developed somewhere else, that's how they're thinking, and it would make sense. And that's the sensitivity that we took from chapter 2. We don't get to just start throwing out labels because we like anatomical terms. That's not being generous. That's being smarty pants. Like, oh, I know what rotator cuff is. Okay, well, great. But now we're going to take it a step further. And the nature of injuries means that all of that anatomy gets to be included in your assessment, not just a part of the anatomy, not just these muscles. Okay. So that's shoulder injury number 1, winged scapula. Ready for number 2? Okay. These are real clients, by the way, just seen in the last few weeks. Okay. So if we have 4 balanced curves of the spine, which Murph clearly doesn't have because of course he would have to be mine. That's given his name. We've had this discussion before. Let's assume though that 4 balanced curves is possible in any other human besides Murph. And your client is presenting with a lateral flexion in their spine, just lateral flexion. So you would notice that at first as they're sitting in front of you because one shoulder is a little lower, right? Now that could be coming from a lot of places. You got to assess where that's coming from. But when you notice that their shoulder is lower and they also have a lateral curve, lateral flexed curve in their spine, what muscles are responsible for holding the spine upright evenly right to left and not having lateral flexion? What muscles are responsible? I'm testing you guys. Hot seating. Who wants to hot seat? Paraspinals, Anna said. What else? What else is responsible for lateral flexion of the spine?
QL.
QL. Yep, Gary.
Psoas.
So
As a bit. Yep. There's another.
obliques.
Obliques. Yep, exactly. Lots of muscles to choose from. How do we decide which one it is when those muscles are less easy to test and assess than the rotator cuff muscles? How do you decide? At the risk of sounding redundant, you go back to your anatomy and figure out more details about those muscles and the nature of those muscles and what they do and what would happen if they weren't doing that thing. If they weren't showing up to their job full time, what would that look like? That's how you parse out injuries. It's step 1. So in this client's case, it doesn't even matter right now if I tell you which muscle it is. What we did with her was recognize that she was doing a lot of upper body strengthening. She's working out with 2 different movement practitioners. One of them has her using her own body weight. The other one has her using external weights, which is common for movement. This is not a problem. So she's weight bearing here on her shoulders with all joint actions. She's doing presses, she's doing overhead lifts, she's doing rotations, she's doing hyperextension, she's doing all the joint actions to get upper body strength. Given what I just shared with you guys about the alignment of the scapula, do you also see that the other 2 joints in the shoulder girdle would also be affected if they're not even level and parallel to the floor? Yeah. So now that client actually has more shoulder pain in more places because there's more joints involved in that discrepancy. All we had her do to fix it was to have her sit upright, literally use muscles that weren't being used to do that job. They were being hijacked to do something else. All we had her do was sit upright and then hold something heavy in her hands. She could barely do it. So I ask you, movement practitioners, how was she able to do her workouts then? She wasn't. She was compensating the whole time. So in that circumstance, that client had a discrepancy that she came into her movement practice with, and it perpetuated. You get to stop doing that, movement people. Like we don't want people in pain. I know that. That's why you guys are here every week. But it's so simple, right? And it's not that her shoulder is a problem, right? That's the other catch. Super tempting to think there's something wrong with just this shoulder, just this shoulder. Oh, it hurts. It hurts right here. What's that muscle? Let me do some thumping or some CBD oil or whatever it is that you try to do to get, quote, muscles to not be responsive. It had nothing to do with her shoulder. It had nothing to do with her shoulder. It wasn't a shoulder injury, but she could point to the spot. She could point to it with a lot of accuracy and then recreate that pain while she moved. Her shoulder wasn't coming from the shoulder, babes. There's more to it. That 90-10 rule is real. And the balance of these 4 curves is critical. I recognize I'm sounding very stern right now. I woke up with my own physical pain today. So I'm like, let's get everybody out of pain ASAP. So I'm driving us home to victory here today. So thank you for bearing with me. Okay, that's shoulder injury number 2. You ready for number 3? And then I'll turn over some questions to you guys for other injuries. You guys ready?
Yep.
Okay, shoulder injury number 3. Ready should I hot quiz you? Hot seat. That was a hot seat and a quiz question blurred into one. Should I hot quiz you? Okay.
Sure. Yeah,
Name
we've all
a-
been on the hot seat. We
yeah,
got it.
yeah, beautiful. I love it. I love it. Okay,
Yeah.
name a muscle
Mm.
that is a shoulder muscle
Mhm.
that mostly lives downstairs of the shoulders. Say it, Anna. You got it. Your mute button's hiding from you.
Yeah, it was. Latissimus dorsi.
Lat Dorsi. Yeah, it's a mouthful, isn't it? So let me just share with us just a reminder. We all know Lat Dorsi. Of course we do. It's like got the largest real estate on the back, right? Swimmer's muscle.
Mhm.
It's one of those muscles that we don't use very often unless you happen to be a swimmer, which is beautiful. And when you're not using when you're not using lat dorsi, just like any other muscle, it gets weaker, right? 24 hours before the atrophy process begins. So here's our lat dorsi. Wow, look at all that real estate. Schmoly, holy schmoly. Little tiny insertion here on the shoulder, but it's a huge shoulder muscle. Most of the insistence that I have on lat dorsi is this connective tissue down here, which is completely encasing the lumbar vertebra and the sacrum simultaneously. Completely. It's the aponeurosis. It's the tendon of that muscle. What did we just do? We went back to anatomy. Just where's the muscle live? Where's the attachments? You don't have to memorize attachment points anymore. I've shared with you guys, I don't always remember the names of all the bony landmarks anymore, but I know where they're attaching. And that always means there's a tendon. That's straight up anatomy. That's all you know. That's plenty. If you want to know the bony landmarks, go for it. You should. So the lat dorsi is covering all of this and all of this. This means 2 curves out of 4 in the spine. And you can just see with your blind eye, with your naked eye, that that is a lot of density of tendon holding force on the lumbar and sacral curves. If you add that to someone who needs lat dorsi because they're a swimmer, that's going to automatically impede lat dorsi, wouldn't it? If the tendon's on, sort of like held duress. And if this person doesn't use lat dorsi very often and the muscles atrophied and they have posture that reverses their lumbar curve and tucks under their sacrum. Yeah, Gary, exactly. So now when that person goes to do any overhead work or any other type of weight bearing with their shoulders, they're also going to have a lot of feedback in this joint. And it's going to be, or in this area, and it's going to be super tempting to say, oh, well, there's 3 joints in the area. It's probably one of the 3 joints, maybe more, all the muscles that go with it, everything we just started with. Except that you'd spend a lot of time there and not create many results, even if your person was a swimmer. Because most of what happens with lat dorsi, which is a shoulder muscle, happens down here. And just like we talked about with scapula and thoracic, the alignment of these 2 curves is going to absolutely dictate the availability of the muscle that relies on those 2 bones as their home base. 2 bones meaning 2 bone sections. So your client has a shoulder injury, they're doing bench pressing, they're not doing equal weights right to left. You add a little more reps on the right because that's the one that feels weak. Meanwhile, lat dorsi down here is like melting under the pressure and then also responding with more force and torque so that he can hold down the fort down here, while up here is being mistreated, and you're going to still have symptoms of shoulder pain and spend a lot of time there, and that's not where it is. That was client number 3. These are all real clients, by the way. And they all do movement practices regularly. And then came to me and said, I don't know what's wrong with my shoulder. That's what's wrong with your shoulder. Only one of them was actually a shoulder issue, and it didn't stem from the shoulder. But they were all being exacerbated by their lack of form and alignment and excessive weight and movement on a joint that was also not aligned.
Mm.
That is the base of the Schatz method. Why do I bring that up? Because we use all that anatomy and inspired beyond anatomy to give us this foundation to be like, ah, I see it now. I can connect all the parts, literally the parts, to get me to the solution. And as I said earlier in our talk together today, I love techniques, guys. If I can get the job done quicker and more efficiently, I am first in line. But when we're only learning techniques and we don't really have clarity around the anatomy beneath those techniques and what they're affecting and how the parts all relate to each other, then we just stay very busy with a lot of techniques. And it actually erodes our confidence because we're not sure why they aren't working. And we don't know why the technique does work on some clients and doesn't work on others. Because you need to connect the anatomy dots. And that's why we have so much anatomy in our mastery program, so that you just have all the anatomy and then it's not confusing anymore. And Anna, you started us off by saying, I just went back to the anatomy. I got the anatomy and then I could sort out confidently this shoulder issue with my client today, which is perfect. You're going to add, Anna? Yeah.
So the first thing I did with her, because she walked in with one shoulder higher than the other. So the first thing I did with her is have her optimally sit and find the curves of the spine and show her that when she did that, she was able to actually level out her spine, the shoulder height, and then put her against the wall. And then did 60-40 block again, just to reinforce and to be able to show her that when her four curves were aligned, her shoulders actually leveled out. So that was the first thing I did with her. And you know, it just goes to show you, like, what you teach us just so like it's so incredibly accurate, right? I mean, her shoulders leveled and she's like, oh. And then we did other stuff, but you're dead right. You know, yeah, of course you are.
Alignment, strength, function, baby. That's our formula.
Yeah.
Okay, good. All right, babe. So let me turn the tables over to you now. What questions do you have, either on something we already talked about or another injury, how to find the genesis of that one? Of course, everybody here in the club seats, you can just come off mute. And everyone who's here live on YouTube, feel free to use chat and let me know what questions can I answer for you. Movement and injuries is our focus for today. Movement and injuries. How can I support you? Gary, what do you got?
This is a question related to working with clients who, in 2 out of the 3 cases, were working with other practitioners,
Yeah.
whether it's PTs or fitness people. And obviously things were not being done right. How do you navigate that piece of it?
Such a powerful question, Gary.
Mm.
It's a huge value in our community to partner. So those of you who are in the club, you've seen Partnering for a Pain-Free World. Those of you who've been with me for a million years, you know that we've all taken that course, and I still behave that way for so many reasons. The list is super long. So I'm a huge fan of partnering, but more than that, it's mandatory in my community. So Schatz method practitioners get to partner. That's just how we roll. And there's a way to partner where everybody wins. So when you mentioned, Gary, you know, clearly things are not being done right. They're not being done well. The other practitioner, it's implying that the other practitioner is making mistakes. That's never a valuable come from, right? You're not going to make friends and partners with that kind of an approach. So the first step, besides just adopting that as a value system, the first step in interacting with another practitioner is to recognize what their intention is. Like, what are they attempting to create with the client that you're sharing? And then approach it from that perspective. We're sharing this client and we both want the best for them. What are you currently working on? And let me share with you what I'm currently working on, and let's see where the overlap is. It's also, interestingly enough, how the method took root because there was a neurologist who sent a patient to a physical therapist who sent a patient to me, and we all wanted her out of pain. So I wasn't going to just mimic what everybody else had already done. I had to find the other thing that wasn't being done. So it goes both ways when you partner. It's not, I'm telling you what to do, but I want to know what you're doing and how the body's responding to that so that I can do something else. It's not just you didn't do the right thing, and so therefore I'm going to tell you what to do. It's not, that's not partnering either. So your come from gets to be really clean, that you're in partnership and your intention is clear and you are sharing that client. And then approach the other practitioner in the same way. Not that they've done something wrong, but what are they doing? What are they attempting to do? And then what do they know about the thing that they're attempting? So for example, with the movement practitioners that I'm talking about, that we are technically sharing a patient, right? Sometimes the practitioners know about alignment and lat dorsi and the four curves, and sometimes they don't. They're just trying to get someone stronger. And they don't actually really know or want to deal with an injury. Sometimes they don't want to deal with the injury. Not all personal trainers want to stop what they're doing to navigate an orthopedic discrepancy. And so they either get to decide to refer that client to somebody else who can navigate an orthopedic restriction, or they get to partner with you and then figure out, like, if I do that, would that be okay? Like, if I just do this with my client and then give them back to you, is that okay? And that's also effective partnering. They don't have to have an orthopedic lens in the work that they do. But if they do have an orthopedic lens in the work that they do, and they're still continuing to make those choices, the best thing to do is set up a direct line of communication with them already with the same intent that I just shared with you. My intent is to get this person support and pain-free movement. I believe that that's yours as well. Let me know. And what are you working on? And then you get to speak openly about what you think is causing it, or what isn't helping, or how the work that you're doing is being, sort of pummeled over. Or maybe you could separate the timing. So for example, if I put someone into alignment while they're with me and then they go to work out directly afterward, that's perfect because they're aligned, and then they go to strengthen. But then I need to see them again to see how their body did that strengthening. So that's a new cycle. There's a new appointment schedule, if you will. And if I can communicate that to the person that I'm sharing a patient with, then the patient gets what they need. I don't have to put all that work on the other provider. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I like the strategy of that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and everybody wins.
Exactly. If we're not playing that everybody wins, then somebody's being greedy and they should go back to doing some other type of work
Right.
instead of working with people. And sometimes that happens and it's heartbreaking. I mean, I've had that in my, career path as well, Gary, where I've just been like, why is that practitioner making those choices and refusing to connect for the betterment of the person we're both working with? Like, do they not want them to be out of pain? And that just doesn't help. Like, that storyline in my brain doesn't help. So you just drop it, just drop the storyline, make another attempt for connection. If that one's also met with deaf ears, then you reroute. But you don't harbor that the other person is choosing not to partner. Just partner with people who do win, and then develop who do want your patients and clients to win, and then partner with them so that your person that you're in service to, you say, I hear you that every time you go to work out, or every 3 weeks after you've worked out, this sort of seems like a cyclical thing. What if you tried working out over here with this person who does alignment-based movement? And then your network is bigger, and then you can make the referral because you're ultimately, it's going to sound harsh, guys. Ultimately, your clients don't care if they work with you or not. What they care about is the results that you've promised them. And if you're not providing those results, they will be happy to leave and go somewhere else. So we like to think, oh no, my clients are devoted, they love me. Yeah, but they also love the results that they're paying for more than they love you. Let's just be honest. And they should. Everybody gets to take care of themselves first. That's the point. That's why they've invested their resources to get their needs met. So that is absolutely their framework, and it absolutely should be. So If you point out where their benefits are coming from and where their benefits are being impeded, they will make a better choice for themselves. That's definitely the bottom of the, that's like the end of the line though. Like you don't just start, this is what you don't do. You don't start telling your clients and patients that the other provider is making all kinds of mistakes. It doesn't land well. Now you just sound like you're a complaining, I was going to say complaining Joe, but my brother's name's Joe. So it just sounds like you're doing a lot of complaining and throwing people under the bus, and now you look like the fool. So don't do that. Don't do that. Partner first with the intention that everybody wants the same thing, you, the other provider, and the client, and then proceed from there in a generous way. Okay, you got it, Gary. What are other questions? Anna, you got one?
I'm hoping I remember this correctly when we talked about source of injury. I am remembering that that 90-10 rule or the 80-20 rule, that 80% of the time or 90% of the time, the source is not where the pain is.
Right.
But I do remember, I'm thinking, except for the knee joint and the shoulder joint.
Mm-hmm.
And so I want to go back to those two exceptions, and in particular, in this case, the shoulder joint. So I'm just going back to this morning. So, rather than pouring right into there, I did do alignment-based work with her, but my question is, how do you, do you do then that measuring, and then do you do the alignment work of how we're designed or how the spine is designed before you even go to assess what kind of movement is available to her in that shoulder joint?
Your question is, do you check their alignment before assessing movement?
Yeah, like knowing that potentially it could be a problem in the shoulder, right? That it could be, could be. Regardless, even knowing that there is a good chance that it could be, do we always go back then to check, to measure and check that alignment of the four curves?
If you're a Schatz method practitioner, yes. You always do that first because we have our formula: alignment, then strength, then function, which is based on anatomy. In order for the muscles that you would be targeting to come back online and respond to the work that you're having them do, they can only do that to their maximal, I'm making up words, availability, if the bones that they are relying on as home base are in a healthy and aligned relationship with each other. That formula came straight out of anatomy. It's our formula, but it's an anatomy formula. Okay, so it's not any special sauce anywhere else except we have the special sauce. But let me talk also about, which is why, Anna, I was like, why didn't you measure? Right? That's why my eyes got wide. Like, why would you skip first step, which would make it so easy for you to assess the genesis? And cool. So you're asking, and I think it clicked, and that's why you're asking this question. So that's great. So that's why we're here, and we just get reminded so that we can stay fresh. But let me touch also on the 90-10, 80-20, with the exception of the shoulder and knee joint, because I feel like that can sometimes, when we have an analyzer processing, we can sort of like spin, can feel like a broken record, like but. And so let me just offer some clarity on the referral pain. Number one, the reason why that number, big picture, matters, that most of the pain in the body is referred from somewhere else, whether it's 80-20 or 90-10, whether it's in the shoulder joint and knee joint or not. The reason why that number matters, from my perspective as a trainer, is to stop us from chasing symptoms and wasting our time and not creating results. Whether it's 80-20, 90-10, shoulder, knees, or not, most of the time when we are addressing a symptom, we are wasting our time and theirs. So big picture, that's why I keep repeating the number and repeating the number, to just like get us out of the habit of it hurts, so I'm going to go poke there. let me jump. How high? Like it's kind of like a knee-jerk reaction, pun intended, right? Like it hurts. Let me go address the hurt. Yes, I want you to address the hurt, but not at the hurt spot, because most of the time it won't render results. So that's number one for like why the imbalanced scales of 80, 20, 90, 10 matter. Just stop the habits. Stop the habits that don't serve you and your clients. But now specifically, 80-20 versus 90-10. When I was in school, back before the roads were paved and the wheel was invented, the number was 80-20, and that's what the research showed us at the time. Since then, the research has now updated to be 90-10, which is even making my earlier point even more valid. It's only going more in that direction to focus less on symptoms. So that's the reason for the change in number. Now, when it comes to the specifics of the shoulder joint and the knee joint, what it's not saying is that when it's a knee or a shoulder problem, it's always the knee or the shoulder as the genesis, unless it's somewhere else in the body, which means it's referred somewhere else in other instances. It's not saying that. What it's saying is that the percentage of chances that a shoulder injury or symptom or a knee symptom is coming from that area is something greater than 80-20 or 90-10. But most of the pain in the body being referred is still the answer, body-wide, head to toe. It's just more likely that you will find something in the shoulder and knee than other areas of the body, which is very less likely. So you still want to be like, okay, it's shoulder, pause. Okay, let me just assess here. And you already said it, Anna. Even though your client came with a shoulder injury, you noticed that it was actually down here, or you wouldn't have had her sit upright to balance out her shoulders before ever addressing those muscles. You even said it. Doesn't matter if it's more likely that it's in the shoulder or not. For you today with your client, you already saw that it wasn't coming from there predominantly. The other piece I'll add to it, with the exception of the shoulder or knee part of this equation, is that once we have an imbalance down here or a pulling lat dorsi on the shoulder and any discrepancy that happens in the shoulder, because of the precarious nature of this joint and the amount of gravity that's constantly fighting its stabilization, by the time we do create an imbalanced movement here, there is a more likely chance that we will damage something in here in that process. But that doesn't mean that's where it started. It means that was a very specific response to something down here that was imbalanced, that I then made this joint overwork, and then that joint got injured. A rotator cuff tear, a labrum tear, etc. Brachial plexus runs through there as well. Same thing with the knee down here. Once we move with less than optimal alignment in the lower extremity, and we make the knee do movement that it's not designed to move, like it's designed with just a little bit of torsion, mostly for absorption purposes only, not because the knee is supposed to rotate or torque. But if you're watching someone's gait and there's a lot of torsion in their tibia, that's coming from somewhere else, but that amount of torsion is going to affect the soft tissue in the knee, and that knee is going to be damaged eventually because it's not designed to bear that much weight with that amount of movement. So they might come initially with like some knee tenderness, and then it doesn't get addressed elsewhere. There's just a TENS unit that they put on the knee. Oh, okay, it feels better. But the actual injury that's making the tibia torque like that has not been corrected. And then they will have a torn meniscus or worse. And they're like, see, I was right. My knee, my terrible knee. Nothing wrong with your knee. Your knee came perfect. What did you do with it while you were here? So that's my 80-20, 90-10 shoulder knee exception, full throttle. Did that support you, Anna? Did that answer your question? Okay, great. All right, my friends, this has been a fun journey. We always get a little more somber when we talk the actual injuries. I know. And so I feel like me too. Yeah. You guys are doing great. And I'm so happy that you're, focused on where to find the genesis of the solution, because I firmly believe that that's gonna be our claim to fame sooner than later. And we are moving on next month to more advanced movement and how to prevent injuries. So that'll be also a lovely journey. So if this conversation today really lit you up and you want to know more, next month should absolutely light you up. So I'm delighted for that. So believe it or not, next Tuesday training is the start of another new summer month. It's going by, guys. It's kind of going by. So bring your questions if you have them next week. For those of you who are in the club, your new course will drop this Friday. So it's the beginning of the month. So the new course will drop on Friday. You have until then to absorb Inspired Beyond Anatomy, part 1, 2, or 3, or all of the above. From now until Friday, you have access to that. If you've not yet joined us there and you want to, go grab it, because we would love for you to have that information. Then we'll move on together in August with more movement focused, alignment based, optimal anatomy function. Okay. All right, my friends. It was so fun to see you guys today. I'll see you guys next week. In the meantime, continue to do great work in the world. Okay. Bye for